In the blistering heat of the American West, where the sun scorched the earth with a vengeance, Janelle Carter, a black single mother, clung desperately to her 8-year-old son, Malik, on a desolate roadside. Can you imagine the weight of that moment? The air was so thick with heat it felt like breathing fire, and the two of them had just been cast out like unwanted debris by her late husband's family, the Whitmores. No one stopped to help. No one even glanced their way. It was as if they were invisible, left to wither under a merciless sun on a lonely stretch of interstate, with no gas stations, no shelter, not a single shred of shade to offer relief. Death hovered close, its shadow as real as the burning gravel beneath them. The temperature soared past 100 degrees Fahrenheit, 38 degrees Celsius, to be exact, hot enough to make the asphalt shimmer like a cruel mirage. Janelle, her cotton dress torn at the knee, her hair a wild tangle, and her sun-ravaged skin streaked with dried blood, lay collapsed beside her son. The dust and gravel stung her every breath, creeping through her thin clothes, searing her peeling skin. Oh, how her heart must have ached. In her arms, Malik, barely conscious, his small hands swollen, his lips tinged a terrifying purple, clung to her dress. Even in his fevered haze, some spark of hope kept his tiny fingers curled around the fabric, as if he couldn't bear to let go of his mother, his anchor. Beside them, a faded fabric bag held their last possessions, an almost empty water bottle, the pitiful remnants of a life uprooted. No phone, no ambulance, nothing but the cruel indifference of the world around them. The relentless chirping of crickets filled the air, mingling with the oppressive heat that seemed to thicken with every passing second. Janelle's voice, hoarse and cracking, whispered, "Malik, baby, wake up. Don't scare Mommy, please." Her words were a plea, a prayer, but no response came. Can you feel the desperation in her voice? Behind the imposing black wrought iron gates of the Whitmore estate, Beatrice Whitmore, Janelle's former mother-in-law, stood like a statue, her face devoid of warmth. She held a glass of iced tea, the clinking of ice against the glass a mocking contrast to the sweltering misery outside. Her gaze wasn't angry or sympathetic, just cold, detached, as if Janelle and Malik were stray animals trespassing on her pristine lawn. Beside her, Percy Langston, the family's financial advisor, sneered, his voice dripping with venom. A black woman stepping foot in this estate? It's a stain we'll never wash out, he muttered, as if their very existence was an offense. The electronic gate slammed shut with a final, deafening clang, sealing their fate. Janelle sat on the sun-scorched grass, cradling Malik against her chest, her only treasure in a world that had turned its back on her. She didn't lift her head to beg or plead. She had too much pride for that. But oh, how her heart must have screamed for someone, anyone, to care. The dry wind whipped through, carrying the scent of burning dust and the relentless buzz of cicadas, as if even the heavens had abandoned them. Janelle rested her head on Malik's chest, feeling his weak, faltering breaths, each one slower than the last, dissolving into the stifling air. Was this it? Was this where their story would end? Then, a faint hum broke the silence. An engine, followed by the soft screech of brakes and the crunch of tires on gravel. It wasn't rushed or loud, but it was different, deliberate. A silver-gray Ford F-150 pulled up right where countless cars had sped past, ignoring the mother and son as if they were ghosts. The sunshade lowered slowly, revealing a man with a rugged, sun-kissed face, his eyes squinting against the blazing sunlight. His gaze didn't just skim over them and move on. It lingered, truly seeing them. Silas Whitmore, 41, a reclusive millionaire who once ruled the agricultural world of the West, was no stranger to loss. A fire had stolen his house, his wife, his daughter, leaving him to retreat in his solitude on his vast acres of land, far from the prying eyes and painful questions of the world. "Are you okay?" People used to ask, each word a dagger to his heart. But today, it wasn't a question he saw in Janelle's eyes. It was a silent, desperate plea, raw and wordless. Silas stepped out of the truck, unhurried, his presence steady rather than imposing. He stopped a few steps away, close enough to show he meant no harm, but far enough to give her space. His voice, deep and calm, cut through the wind like a lifeline. "I won't touch anyone, but the boy's burning up. I've got water, a car, and a friend who's a former Army medic. Do you need help?" Can you imagine the weight of those words to Janelle? In a world that had shown her nothing but cruelty, here was a stranger offering not just help, but choice. Janelle didn't answer right away. Her eyes, hardened by years of skepticism, a shield every black woman learns to carry, studied him. Good people were rare, and good white people, even rarer. The venomous words from the Whitmore estate still echoed in her mind. "A colored puppet like you think you can climb into the white family tree? Charles married you for the novelty. What do you have besides that sheepskin?" Even at her husband's funeral, Beatrice had stood before the crowd, her silk handkerchief a prop, her words icy daggers. "Janelle, there are doors of precious wood, but not everyone deserves to walk through them, especially not with feet still caked in slum dirt." Oh, how those words must have burned. Janelle had swallowed her pain in silence too many times, and now, with nothing left but her son, she hesitated, her grip on Malik tightening. Silas saw her doubt, her fear, and he didn't push. Instead, he gently placed a fresh bottle of water on the ground near her feet and stepped back. "I'll leave it here," he said, his voice steady. "If you need more water, I've got it. If you want to go to the hospital, I can take you. If you don't trust me, I'll drive away. But the boy needs you awake." Such a simple gesture, but to Janelle, it was revolutionary. No white person had ever given her the power to choose, to decide her own fate. They'd only demanded gratitude for their scraps of kindness. She looked down at Malik, his lips cracked and dry, his small body fading by the second. Could she wait another minute? Death was too close, lurking like a vulture. With a nod, not of trust, but of a mother's desperate hope, she made her choice. Silas nodded back, no words needed. He opened the truck's back door, revealing a neatly folded blanket, a bottle of antiseptic water, and a small first aid kit. He spread the blanket across the seat, poured water onto a towel, and handed it to Janelle without fanfare. No sermons, no savior complex, just quiet, purposeful action, as if helping a stranger was the most natural thing in the world. Janelle climbed into the truck, clutching Malik tightly, her body a shield against every jolt of the road. Each time the truck hit a pothole, Malik's soft groans pierced her heart, and she leaned over to cradle his head, as if protecting him from the world's cruelty. Can you feel the weight of her love in that moment? Silas drove in silence, his eyes occasionally flicking to the rearview mirror, where the image of a weary mother and her fragile son reflected a bond forged in pure, unyielding love. The truck turned onto a dirt road leading to Red Mesa Farm as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery streaks of orange and red. The farm came into view, a weathered three-story brick house, a white wooden fence, and a faded red-tiled roof peeling with age. The stable stood silent, as if it, too, had forgotten how to breathe. Silas cut the engine, stepped out, and opened the back door without a word, giving Janelle space to carry her son. Janelle stepped onto the farm, Malik limp in her arms, each step heavy with the memories of being cast out, of the Whitmore sneers. Fake, worthless black trash pretending to be a lady. The door to Silas's home opened, revealing a simple wooden hallway that smelled of dried grass, free of judgment or pretense. No servants, no opulent chandeliers, just a quiet, unassuming space that felt like a sanctuary. An hour later, in the warm, unpretentious living room, Dr. Horace Avery arrived. A black man in his 60s, his strong build and steady eyes carried the weight of experience from battlefields in Afghanistan, where survival cared nothing for skin color, only heart. He glanced at Janelle for a moment, then knelt beside Malik's bed, his hands moving with practiced precision as he examined the boy. No words, just focus. Half an hour later, he turned to Silas, his voice low but clear enough for Janelle to hear. The boy's severely dehydrated, with signs of a prolonged high fever. But he's going to make it. And I'll be honest, it's not a miracle. It's because his mother kept him alive. Can you imagine the relief that washed over Janelle? She stood there, her hand never leaving Malik's, her arm trembling as if her body could no longer contain the pain and fear she'd carried. Horace stepped closer, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. You did well, Janelle. Most would have given up long ago. His words were simple, but they carried a weight that broke through her defenses. She nodded, still unable to speak, but her eyes, oh, those eyes, held a flicker of gratitude, a spark of hope she hadn't felt in years. In the kitchen, Silas poured hot water into a kettle, his movements slow and deliberate. He wasn't used to this, caring for others. He'd been clumsy when his daughter, Annie, caught her first cold, leaving his wife, Emily, to handle the sleepless nights while he was lost in meetings with investors from Seattle. But today was different. He acted without being asked, driven by a single, clear reason. Someone needed him, and he refused to stand by and watch, as he had in the past when his world burned down. Upstairs, in the living room where family photos once lined the walls, only one frame remained. Emily, with her smoky gray eyes, and Annie, clutching her teddy bear. That same teddy bear now rested on the chair beside Malik's bed, as if it had appeared there by some quiet magic, a symbol of a home learning to heal from its own wounds. Janelle's gaze fell on the photo, and she paused, her eyes tracing the faces of Silas's lost family. There was no envy, no fear in her expression, only respect, a silent acknowledgement of shared pain. She looked at Malik, his breathing steadier now, and for the first time in years, she felt a flicker of something new. Not just survival, but the possibility of hope. Could this be a turning point? In that simple farm, surrounded by strangers who saw her not as a stain, but as a mother, a person, Janelle Carter began to believe that maybe, just maybe, the world wasn't entirely against her. The soft glow of the oil lamp flickered in the quiet living room of Red Mesa Farm, casting gentle shadows across Janelle Carter's face as she gazed at the lone photo on the shelf. "She's beautiful," she whispered, her voice tender, almost reverent, as her eyes traced the smoky gray gaze of Emily and the bright smile of little Annie, clutching her teddy bear. And the little girl, too, so full of life. Silas Whitmore stood near the doorway, his rough hands wrapped around a glass of water, his broad frame hesitating to cross the threshold. "They're everything to me," he said, his voice low, carrying a weight that seemed to pull the air from the room. Janelle's gaze shifted to him, a question trembling in her throat. "Are you sure they won't see me as an intruder?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, raw with the fear of rejection she'd carried for years. Silas turned away, his eyes drifting to the window where the wind stirred the dry grass, whispering secrets only the land could hear. "Can you feel the heaviness of that moment? I lived in this house for 6 years, and no one called my name," he said, his words slow, as if each one cost him something. "No one touched the dinners I made or laughed with me in the kitchen. If Emily and Annie were still here, I know they'd hate to see me so alone, shut off from the world like this." His voice cracked, just a little, but enough to reveal the ache he'd buried deep. Janelle didn't respond right away. She leaned down, brushing the sweaty curls from Malik's forehead, her hand trembling but her gaze steady, calm in a way that only comes from standing on the edge of despair so many times that falling no longer frightens you. Oh, how strong she must have been. Silas watched her, his eyes fixed on the small, fierce figure shielding her son. In that moment, he didn't see a weary black mother worn down by the world's cruelty. He saw only a mother, her love a force that needed no labels, no explanations, no permission from a society that demanded she fit its mold. He spoke again, his voice softer now, as if unearthing a memory long buried. "Emily was the only woman who ever had patience for my silence. Annie? She was her mother's shadow, always moving, always shouting, 'Daddy, I'm a cowboy.'" A faint smile tugged at his lips, but it faded quickly. "She had a stuffed horse named Daisy. I still keep it." His voice faltered, and he turned his face slightly, as if the dim light might betray the tears welling in his tired eyes. That day, the air was so dry. I was at a shareholder meeting, left them at home. The old power line sparked, exploded while Emily was in the kitchen. They called 911 right away, but he stopped, his breath heavy, his hand tightening around the glass until it made a faint crackling sound. Can you imagine the guilt that gripped him? The fire department took 24 minutes to get there. They blamed the dispatch schedule, but I found out later the truth. Our neighborhood, despite all the taxes we paid, was low priority compared to wider areas. Janelle lifted her head, her eyes, once guarded and sharp, softening, not with pity, but with a quiet recognition. For the first time, she heard a white man name the unspoken truth black people lived with every day. Discrimination wasn't always loud or blatant. It was woven into the systems that claimed fairness while delivering injustice. "You're not making excuses for them," she said, her voice soft but steady. "No," Silas replied, his tone heavy with regret. "I just know if they come 5 minutes sooner, I wouldn't have buried my wife and daughter in one day." The room fell silent, the only sound the gentle rustle of the faded curtain as a breeze slipped through the cracked window. In that dim, flickering light, Janelle felt something shift, a warmth growing in a space that had been cold for too long, a sense of being seen, truly seen, without judgment. Was this what unconditional presence felt like? She turned back to Malik, whose breathing had steadied, his cheeks less flushed, a sign of life returning to his small body. She took a damp cloth, wiping the sweat from his forehead with a tenderness that could break your heart. Silas watched, and something inside him stirred, a part of him that had been frozen for 6 long years. "Not everyone can mother like that," he said, almost to himself, his voice barely audible. Janelle paused. Then a faint smile cracked the armor she'd worn her whole life in a world that told her a poor black woman could never love the right way. Oh, how wrong they were. The night stretched on, quiet except for the distant chirping of cicadas and the soft rustle of eucalyptus trees swaying in the dry wind. Malik's steady breaths were a fragile promise that he'd crossed the line back to life. As the first rays of dawn slipped through the window, touching the edge of the old wooden bed, Malik stirred. His eyes fluttered open, dreamy and slow. "Mom," he whispered, his small hand reaching for her cheek. Janelle leaned down, kissing his forehead, her smile breaking through the exhaustion etched into her face. But before her relief could fully bloom, Malik's voice, young but sharp as a blade, cut through the quiet. "Mom, why do they chase us away like thieves? Is it because I'm black?" Can you hear the pain in that question? It wasn't loud, wasn't tearful, but to Janelle, it was more piercing than any insult, any bruise, any cruelty she'd endured. Her throat tightened, her heart squeezed in her chest as the Whitmore's venomous words echoed back. "You don't belong in the Whitmore family." Beatrice's cold voice at Charles's funeral rang in her ears. "My grandson deserved a wife with breeding. You look like you crawled out of fast food joint. Nothing noble about you except your acting." Janelle had stayed silent then, not because she accepted their hate, but because she thought she was strong enough to carry it alone. But now, seeing the question in her son's eyes, she knew silence wasn't enough. His innocence had been scratched, a wound that would grow unless someone helped to believe he was enough. "It's not because of you, my love," she said, gripping his hand tightly. "Never because of you." Malik nodded. But his gaze was different now, clouded by a truth no 8-year-old should have to learn. How could she protect him from a world so eager to wound him? Meanwhile, Beatrice Whitmore wasn't idle. She didn't need to shout or wave her hands like a street preacher. Her cruelty was polished, delivered with a silver spoon and a smile. She glided through Silver Bluff, visiting the bakery, the pharmacy, the church, her voice dripping with false concern. "I'm not one to judge," she'd say, "but if someone ruined my grandson's marriage and is now living off white men, this town should be cautious." Her words spread like poison. Days later, when Janelle went to the bakery for milk, the saleswoman who once called her dear wouldn't meet her eyes. "We're not serving today," she muttered, taking another customer's money. Janelle turned away, her heart heavy but her head high. On the church fence, a sign screamed in bold letters, "Protect the community from exploitative women." No names, but everyone knew. On social media, the venom flowed. She used to sleep on the estate's floor. Now she's at someone's farm, pulling her old tricks. A bastard child and a sneaky mother. No place in Red Mesa. Can you believe the audacity of their hate? Silas saw it all, but didn't tell Janelle. Instead, he quietly placed a fresh loaf of bread on the kitchen table each morning, poured her coffee, and wiped the window frames clean, as if to say, "This house is yours." No matter what the town whispered, Janelle noticed. She didn't say thank you. Not because she wasn't grateful, but because she'd learned that kindness often came with a price. Yet, in a way her hand gently gripped the teacup Silas handed her, he saw her quiet trust growing. Was this the beginning of something new? Elsewhere, Percy Langston sat in his office, a glass of wine in hand, his fingers tracing old financial papers Silas had signed. He chuckled, his voice low and dangerous. "If Whitmore's serious about that black woman, we'll need to reclaim that land before things get messy." Power wasn't in the courts, it was in the deals struck in shadows, before anyone realized they'd lost everything. Oh, how sinister his plans were. Far away, in a Chicago newsroom where skyscraper lights blurred the horizon, Finn Morgan, an investigative reporter, stumbled across a post in the Silver Bluff Community Watch group. "Black women seduce old, weak white men for money. The Whitmore farm case proves it." Finn paused. He wasn't swayed by social media noise, but something about the post's ugly familiarity made his blood boil. 3 days later, he left with a backpack, a worn leather notebook, and a camera, ready to chase the truth. Finn had exposed racial discrimination in civil suits, police brutality, and corrupt asset deals. He knew one thing. Silence in a scandal meant someone was being silenced. When Finn arrived at Red Mesa Farm at dusk, Silas opened the gate, his eyes wary but softening when he saw Finn's press badge. He gestured toward the red brick house, where the kitchen light glowed warm against the fading sunset. Janelle greeted Finn on the porch, offering lemonade without ice and a worn wooden chair. No makeup, no pretense, just a woman whose strength shone through her quiet dignity. Finn didn't rush or interrupt, scribbling notes by hand, as if each of Janelle's words was a thread weaving a torn truth back together. "I'm not here to write about black women and anger," he said softly. "I'm here to find who created that anger and called it natural." Janelle nodded, a spark of trust in her eyes. 3 days later, Finn got Charles Whitmore's accident report. The details didn't add up. A car speeding at 120 miles per hour, no braking, a missing Bluetooth device, a tampered blood alcohol report, and a final call not to Janelle, but to Crystal Mooney, Charles's white mistress. What was being hidden? Finn's blood ran cold. This wasn't just a tragedy. It was a cover-up. Finn Morgan had chased the truth to Dallas, tracking down Crystal Mooney, the woman whose name lingered in the shadows of Charles Whitmore's accident report. Through a leaked recording from a backup software on an old mobile device, Finn uncovered a chilling fragment of Charles's final moments. "I'm leaving Janelle soon, okay?" Charles shouted, his voice tense with frustration. "But if you call while I'm driving again, I swear I'll..." A horn blared, followed by the screech of brakes, then a haunting silence. Can you imagine the weight of that discovery? It wasn't just an accident. It was a story buried under layers of deceit, and Finn was determined to unearth it. He didn't stop there. Finn quietly reached out to Randy, a local mechanic who'd worked on Charles's car. Randy's memory was sharp as a tack. "Someone picked up the car just hours after the crash," he told Finn, his voice low, cautious. So they were family. It was Percy Langston, paid in cash, asked for a full electrical system check, and took the original Bluetooth device. When Finn pressed him, "Why would Percy do that?" Randy shook his head, his eyes heavy with knowing. "I'm white, but I know what justice looks like." Seeing Janelle vilified like that, someone's whitewashing a dirty truth. Oh, how those words must have fueled Finn's resolve. Meanwhile, Beatrice Whitmore caught wind of Finn's presence in Silver Bluff. She didn't panic. She was too calculated for that. Instead, she invited a lawyer to her estate and whispered to the church pastor and women's group leaders, her voice dripping with false concern. A freelance reporter sniffing around, probably spinning a sympathy story for donations. Janelle's good at that, isn't she? Riding the wave at just the right moment. Can you believe the nerve of her? Percy, ever the loyal enforcer, didn't just talk. He hired a private investigator to tail Finn, tried to hack into his computer, and even made an anonymous call, his voice low and menacing. Some stories don't need digging, friend. Some deaths should stay buried. But Finn was no stranger to threats. He recorded everything, his instincts sharp, his determination unshaken. One rainy evening in a small cafe at the edge of town, Finn sat across from Janelle and Silas, his recorder humming softly. "If you agree," he said, his voice calm but resolute, "I'll publish the whole truth, not just to protect you, but to stop people like Percy and Beatrice from erasing their mistakes with power." Janelle froze, her heart pounding. Could she trust this stranger with her story? She nodded, not out of vengeance, but because for the first time, her voice might finally be heard. As the rain fell at dusk, washing the red dust from the roof of Red Mesa Farm, the kitchen's yellow light spilled onto the scratched oak table. 2 cups of hot tea sat between Janelle and Silas, steaming in the quiet. A heavy silence hung between them. A man who'd buried his emotions for 6 years, and a woman who'd been forced to silence her entire life. Can you feel the weight of that moment? Silas sat across from her, his hand resting lightly on the table, his eyes fixed on Janelle with a patience that didn't demand answers, but offered her the space to speak her truth. "Do you want to tell me about that day?" he asked softly, his voice steady, inviting. Janelle looked down at her hands, her slender fingers worn with calluses from years of hand-washing clothes, cooking meals, and holding together a family that never truly belonged to her. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. "That morning," she began, her voice low but unwavering, "Beatrice called me to the estate. Percy was there, too. They sat in the main hall like judges in their own private court. Beatrice slid a stack of papers across the table, custody documents for Malik. She said if I signed, I'd get a post-marriage support check. Hush money, plain and simple. Oh, how her heart must have raged at their audacity. I asked, what if I don't sign? Janelle continued, her eyes steady, refusing to shy away from the truth. Beatrice just laughed, this light, cruel chuckle like she'd expected me to fight. Percy nodded to 2 men at the door. Before I could react, they grabbed my arms. Malik screamed. One of them shoved him down the steps. Her voice trembled, but she pressed on. His arm hit the stone. Blood poured, and they laughed. Can you imagine the fury, the helplessness? Janelle paused, her eyes dry, the pain too deep for tears. I scooped Malik up. He cried so quietly, like he was trying to be brave. I screamed, "Don't touch my son," and ran out the gate. No shoes, no purse, no phone. I walked over a mile in that burning sun, my boy bleeding in my arms. Silas's fist clenched, his knuckles white. Memories he'd locked away flooded back. Firefighters holding him back as his house burned, the doctor's solemn shake of the head in the ICU. He knew that gut-wrenching helplessness, but Janelle? She'd carried it alone, with no one to lean on. I knocked on 3 houses nearby, she went on, her voice shaking but resolute. One slammed the door in my face. Another yelled, "Get out of this neighborhood." The last one called the police, saying a black homeless woman was causing trouble. Her words hung heavy in the air. I knew I wasn't white. I wasn't born into a class that could waltz into the Whitmore estate without being spat on. But I'm his mother. No matter what they think, I'm the one who gave birth to my son. Silas met her gaze, his voice soft but firm. You don't need anyone to validate that as long as you believe it. Janelle's lips curved into a smile, not light or safe, but forged from courage, from battles she never chose but fought anyway. I thought if I stayed quiet, if I was kind, if I played by their rules, they'd leave Malik alone, she said. But no, they want us cut out because we're a stain on their precious white bloodline. Can you feel the fire in her words? Across town, Beatrice met Percy in the opulent living room of the Whitmore estate. She poured wine, her hands adorned with silk gloves, her voice smooth as venom. She's starting to talk, Percy, and now there's a reporter trailing her. Handle your part. I won't let a black woman ruin this family's legacy. Percy smirked, his voice low and gruff. I'll make sure she has nowhere left to speak. Oh, how sinister their plans were. But Janelle wasn't alone anymore, and the truth was beginning to roar. The news of Beatrice's lawsuit for custody of Malik hit Janelle like a punch, but it wasn't entirely a shock. She knew people like Beatrice would never let go of what they saw as their white bloodline, even after casting it aside. The legal filing was a masterclass in veiled prejudice. Mrs. Beatrice Whitmore, the legal adoptive mother and remaining representative of the Whitmore family, requests custody of her grandson, as the child is currently living in unstable conditions, lacking legal education, with an unemployed mother, no property, and cohabiting illegally with a man of a different race, with no marriage ties. Every word dripped with sophisticated disdain, never explicitly saying a black woman wasn't worthy, but screaming it in subtext. Can you see the hypocrisy? On the day of the trial, the Shady Valley courtroom buzzed with tension. Beatrice sat at the front in a crisp gray suit, her hair styled high, sunglasses dangling from her collar like a badge of superiority. Percy leaned on a silver cane, his eyes cold as ice. Across the aisle, Janelle stood in a simple dark purple dress, her posture unyielding. Beside her, Silas, in a modest suit, was a quiet fortress, his eyes tracking her every breath. The plaintiff's lawyer launched into a lengthy speech, but the message was clear. The child lacks a moral foundation, an academic environment, and traditional values, replaced by disorganized emotions. When Janelle's turn came, she stood alone, no lawyer, no representative, just her truth. Her voice was calm, not loud or angry, but each word hit like a hammer on stone. I don't have a marriage contract. I don't have a mansion, but I have something they don't. I've never abandoned my son. Not when I was thrown out into 104 degrees heat, carrying him across the desert as his blood dripped onto my hands. The courtroom fell silent. No pens tapped. No whispers stirred. Can you hear the power in her voice? I thought if I lived decently, my son would be spared, Janelle continued, her eyes locked on the judge. But there are people who will never forgive a child for carrying half-black blood, especially when that blood ties to a family used to sitting above the law. Beatrice's grip tightened on her coat. Percy's brow furrowed, but Janelle didn't falter. If being a mother means not running away, I've done it. If it means carrying the weight of their words, I've carried it. If it means standing here where my skin is an unspoken crime, I'm standing, not begging, just not letting my child be stolen again. Finn, in the back row, scribbled furiously, a major press agency representative beside him, drawn to a trial that felt more moral than civil. The plaintiff's lawyer fired back. You're living with a white man without legal ties. Is that a good model for a child? Janelle's faint smile wasn't sarcasm, it was defiance. The best thing for my child is to be loved, protected, and taught that his skin isn't something to be ashamed of. Oh, how her words cut through the room. In the spectator seats, Malik sat beside Dr. Horace Avery, clutching his sketchbook, his eyes never leaving his mother. My mom's the strongest, right? He whispered. Horace nodded, no words needed, knowing Janelle was the only one truly fighting for her family. As she sat down, the courtroom held its breath, the silence taut as a wire. Finn stood, his rolled-up white shirt and messy hair betraying sleepless nights, a thick file in his hands. His voice was clear, unwavering. Your Honor, I've uncovered evidence that changes everything. Can you feel the tide turning? The courtroom in Shady Valley County buzzed with tension, every eye fixed on Finn Morgan as he stood, his rolled-up sleeves and tousled hair a stark contrast to the polished suits around him. Your Honor, I request permission to present new evidence, not to rebut, but to expose the true motives of those seeking custody as a weapon of revenge rather than love. His voice was steady, resolute, cutting through the heavy air. Can you feel the anticipation? The judge nodded, his weathered face unreadable. Beatrice Whitmore's brow furrowed, her composure cracking like thin ice. Percy Langston's silver cane began tapping lightly on the floor, a nervous rhythm betraying his cool facade. Finn turned on his recorder, and a familiar voice filled the room, dry, commanding, unmistakably Beatrice's. "After that woman loses custody, we'll take back Red Mesa. I don't care if Silas is living with her. The land belongs to the Whitmore family. It goes back where it belongs." Oh, the raw venom in her words. No polite pretense, just the unfiltered truth she thought no one would hear. Beatrice's face drained of color, her eyes darting to Percy as if screaming, "How does that recording exist?" Finn didn't pause. "Next, I present a copy of a deed for the 40 acres of Red Mesa Farm, signed under Silas Whitmore's name. But the signature doesn't match." He held up the document, his voice rising with conviction. The actual signer was Percy Langston, using a forged power of attorney from Charles Whitmore before his death. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Finn pulled out a stack of notarized papers from a former investment lawyer and a legal appraisal from the Arizona State Asset Control Office. These lands weren't just illegally seized. They were mortgaged for a joint venture loan Percy's, now under investigation by the U.S. Department of Justice. Can you imagine the shock? Beatrice closed her eyes, her lips pressed tight. Percy's cane stopped tapping, his hand trembling. The air conditioner's hum felt colder, sharper, as if the room itself held its breath. The judge nodded to the clerk, and the left door swung open with a creak. 2 federal officers strode in, their badges glinting, carrying an emergency arrest warrant for Percy Langston. Charges of forgery, federal financial fraud, and unauthorized asset manipulation. Percy stammered. "I was just following Charles's orders. I didn't mean," but his words were cut off by the cold snap of handcuffs. The sound echoed like a gavel in the stunned silence. Beatrice remained seated, her once regal air shattered. The faint layer of lipstick couldn't hide her ghostly pallor. The judge turned to her, his voice firm. "Do you have anything to say, Mrs. Whitmore?" She scanned the room, but every eye had turned away. The Whitmore name, once a crown, was now a shackle. I just want what's best for the child," she said, her voice trembling, unconvincing. Janelle's laugh, soft but piercing, cut through the moment. "What's best for my son, by taking his mother away." Oh, how her words stung with truth. Silas stood, no papers or notes in hand, just the quiet strength of a man who'd lost everything and found purpose again. He walked to the center of the courtroom, his head bowed slightly, like an old farmer called to a sacred duty. "I'm Silas Whitmore, owner of Red Mesa Farm," he began, his voice steady, resonant. "The property's worth over $30 million. Murmurs swept through the room, but he raised a hand, silencing them. "But I'm not here for land or money. I'm here for a boy who called me dad on a day when his mother had nothing left but pain." His eyes found Malik, bright and watching from Janelle's side. "I don't need paperwork to be a father, but if I must, I'll sign anything to prove it. I'll never abandon that boy, not because of his skin, not because of what people say, but because my heart won't let me." Can you feel the weight of his promise? The courtroom fell silent, no applause needed. The truth had sliced through the lies, and even Beatrice knew it. The gavel's sharp crack echoed through the wooden courtroom, a final tolling of justice. The court rules. Janelle Carter shall have full legal custody of her son, Malik Carter. Silas Whitmore is recognized as the legal stepfather. No cheers, no clapping, just a heavy, reverent silence, as if the room itself exhaled after a long-held breath. Janelle stood, her legs trembling, not from fear but from the sheer force of her fight. Every ounce of her strength poured into defending her honor, her truth, her motherhood. She swayed, nearly collapsing, but Silas's steady arm caught her, wrapping around her like a shelter against the storm she'd just survived. Malik didn't wait for permission. He leapt from his seat, his coloring book forgotten, a crumpled hostage to Mom, sign slipping from his pocket. He threw himself into Janelle's arms, then wrapped them around Silas, his face glowing. "Now I have a dad, right? Dad won't ever leave Mom, will he?" Silas knelt, his hand gentle on Malik's shoulder, his eyes soft with a peace he hadn't known in years. "Never, son." No one laughed. No one cried. But the room seemed to breathe easier, as if the storm had finally passed. The judge cleared his throat, but said nothing. Words felt small compared to the moment's weight. Beatrice sat motionless, her gaze fixed on Percy's abandoned silver cane, a relic of her crumbling empire. Her lipstick had faded, her proud posture slumped. "It's impossible," she whispered, but the court didn't need her belief. For the first time, the truth didn't require her permission. Percy was gone, his handcuffed footsteps still echoing in the room's corners, his forged contracts and schemes now exposed as crimes, not tools of power. As the crowd began to disperse, Mrs. Mildred, the sheriff's wife, approached Janelle, her weathered hand squeezing Janelle's shoulder. "I've never seen anyone fight as beautifully as you, Janelle. Not with money or fame, but with a heart that refuses to surrender." Janelle clasped her hand, her eyes unguarded for the first time in years, filled with relief, with the freedom of being her true self. Can you imagine that release? Finn Morgan closed his notebook, his pen still. He didn't need more notes. His article wouldn't just be about a trial, but a declaration of life. A black mother didn't need anyone to define her worth to be a mother. As Janelle, Silas, and Malik stepped out of the courthouse, the early March wind blew softly, carrying a chill that felt cleansing. On the steps, Silas held Malik's hand, his other gently supporting Janelle's back. The three of them, no shared blood, but a family forged in resilience, walked together. Behind them, a decaying billboard for the Whitmore Legacy Foundation swayed, its faded letters a forgotten symbol of a name no longer revered. Was this the start of something new? One late spring afternoon, a gentle breeze swept across the western hills of Red Mesa, stirring fresh green grass among the dry rocks. The sky was clear as a mountain lake, with soft white clouds drifting like memories set free. Silas walked slowly along a narrow trail, his hand clasped tightly in Janelle's, their steps steady, purposeful. Malik ran ahead, clutching a bouquet of wildflowers he'd picked from the valley below, their vibrant colors dancing in the sunlight. Each step felt like a bridge between what was lost and what was blooming anew. At the hill's crest stood a small family cemetery, simple white stone markers gleaming under the open sky. No grand statues, no marble arches, just two graves side by side. Emily Whitmore, beloved wife. Annie Whitmore, the girl whose smile lit up the world. Silas stopped, his hand resting on the cool stone, his eyes deep with unspoken words. Can you feel the weight of his grief, softened by hope? He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. Inside gleamed a slender platinum ring. No stones or ornate designs, just 3 letters engraved inside. J. Essam. "I kept the old ring for the past," Silas said, his voice low, like the whisper of pine trees in the wind. "This is the new one, not to replace, but to rebuild. Not to forget Emily or Annie, but to make their loss the foundation for a new home. A home that once burned to ashes, now rising again." Janelle stood silent, her gaze not on Silas, but on Emily's faded gravestone photo, those smoky gray eyes and gentle smile. She stepped forward, kneeling at the grave, not to pray or plead, but to rest her hand on the green grass, as if touching the shoulder of another woman who'd loved this man. "I didn't come to erase your memories," she whispered. "I came to help preserve them, just as they were, as they deserve to be." Oh, how her words carried love and respect. Malik stepped forward, placing his wildflowers before Annie's grave, his small voice steady. "Annie, I don't know what you were like, but I promise I'll make Dad Silas smile every day like you did." Silas stood still, his tears hidden but unnecessary, his gentle squeeze of Janelle's hand, his bowed head toward the graves, said everything. Janelle turned to him, and he opened his palm, placing the ring in her hand, not kneeling, not proposing in grand gestures, but offering a chance he thought he'd lost forever. She studied the ring, her eyes tracing the simple band, and nodded, not out of fleeting emotion, but because she was respected, seen as a woman with a voice, scars, a past, and a future worth fighting for. Can you see the strength in that moment? The sun dipped low over the hills of Red Mesa, casting a golden glow as Janelle Carter, Silas Whitmore, and young Malik descended from the quiet family cemetery. No one carried flowers. No one shed tears. They carried something far more precious, something buried deep for too long. Hope. Can you imagine the weight of that moment, the quiet promise of a new beginning? A month later, the faded sign for Red Mesa Ranch was gone, replaced by a hand-painted wooden board that read Sunrise Ranch, a name that whispered of dawn, of second chances. There was no grand ceremony, no banners fluttering, no ribbons to cut. But that morning, the vast, silent land seemed to hum with a fresh breeze, not a loud rebirth, but a quiet, steadfast commitment. This place, once a monument to pain, was now a beacon of possibility. Oh, how the air must have felt alive. The old horse barn, weathered and worn, had been transformed. Its wooden planks gleamed with fresh polish, the floor relayed with recycled bricks, each one a testament to renewal. The outside still bore traces of chipped paint, but inside, a whole new world. Janelle Carter, once cast out like she was less than human, stood at the center of this reborn space, a teacher in every sense of the word. Can you picture her strength? On the blackboard, her chalk traced a clear, steady line. Today, we learn letters, but most importantly, how to stand back up after being pushed down. Nearly 20 children sat on wooden benches. No uniforms, some in flip-flops, others barefoot. Children of color, children of workers, immigrants, those forgotten by the system, their eyes bright with curiosity. A curly-haired girl with pigtails leaned toward her friend, whispering, "Miss Janelle's as pretty as a fairy, but not like those teachers in my old school." Always asking, "Did your parents pay the tuition?" Janelle moved through the room, her touch gentle but firm, guiding small hands to form letters, her gaze warm but never pitying. These kids didn't need sympathy. They needed a chance. She knew their story, having once been a child left behind, met with sneers instead of questions. "Where are you from? How do you say your name? Did your mom ever go to prison?" In a quiet corner, Malik, now 10, scribbled diligently, his pencil dancing across the page. His story's title? The Man Who Planted Grass, But Grew a Family. That's what he called Silas, the man he once feared would vanish like so many others, but who stayed, quietly tending the soil, clearing rocks, building a home that was real. Sunrise Ranch wasn't just for the three of them anymore. Every morning, children's laughter echoed from the classroom, mingling with the scent of freshly baked bread drifting from the kitchen. Kids raced past the white fence, chasing each other through rows of newly planted carrots, their joy as bright as the sun. Ruby May, the neighbor girl who once helped with gardening, now led the children in sowing seeds, her small hands teaching them how to nurture life. Can you hear the life in that place? Beatrice Whitmore, stripped of her town council seat, lived quietly in a modest apartment on the city's edge. One day, flipping through the local paper, her eyes caught a small headline. Sunrise Ranch opens free community classes for out-of-school children, founded by Janelle Carter, a woman who survived prejudice's wounds. She folded the paper, her face blank. No anger, no regret, just the hollow stare of someone who'd lost not just power, but the moral ground to fight. Oh, how the mighty had fallen. In the classroom that was once a horse barn, Janelle placed a photo frame on the bookshelf, Silas holding little Annie, Emily's bright smile beside them. Below it, she hung a chalk-written note. Your story doesn't end where others stop believing in you. Can you feel the power in those words? That afternoon, as the sun dipped early behind gray clouds, a breeze carried the scent of cut grass and lavender from the classroom's windowsill. Janelle sat with Malik, guiding him through the ending of his first short story, about a man who thought he only knew grass but learned to mend a broken heart. Suddenly, the soft crunch of shoes on dry ground broke the rhythm of ranch life. Janelle looked up, her heart skipping. There stood Beatrice Whitmore. No driver, no Prada sunglasses, No haughty gaze that once silenced rooms. Just an older woman, gray hair unkempt, eyes red from sleepless nights, standing beyond the white fence. Janelle didn't rise. She stayed seated, her hand resting on Malik's paper, grounding herself in the truth. This was her home now. Beatrice stopped a few yards away, as if sensing she no longer had the right to step closer. Her voice trembled, not with fear, but with an ego worn to its breaking point. "I didn't come to take anything back," she said. I just want to speak the truth once." Janelle held her gaze, silent. Malik glanced up, curious. "Who's that, Mom?" But Janelle's gentle hand on his stopped him. He understood, returning to his coloring, tracing the word hope in green pencil. Beatrice took a shaky breath. "I envied you," she admitted, her voice cracking. "Not because you're Malik's mother, but because Charles looked at you with eyes I never got, even when he stopped loving me. I thought I could erase you from everyone's memory to reclaim the legacy." Her words choked, raw and exposed. That was wrong. Silence fell, heavy and unbroken. The wind whistling through the old barn door, now a classroom, creaking as if echoing memories no one wanted to relive. Janelle didn't say, "I forgive you," not because she lacked compassion, but because forgiveness didn't need words, especially for someone who'd once stolen her voice. She nodded, not for peace, but to release the weight for herself. Beatrice lowered her head and turned away. No invitation inside, no tea offered, no farewell hugs. But maybe, just maybe, she'd received something rare, a silence free of hatred. Can you imagine the power of that moment? Weeks later, Percy Langston faced his reckoning. 5 years in prison for forgery, fraudulent asset manipulation, and slandering an innocent woman. No one waited outside the courthouse. No allies from his days as the Southwest financial strategist. Just a prisoner transport van and 2 impassive federal officers. As he was led away in handcuffs, Percy glanced back, searching for a sympathetic eye, but found none, not even from those who once toasted him at lavish banquets. His empire, built on others' pain, crumbled to a silence thick with contempt. Oh, how justice had spoken. That evening at Sunrise Ranch, Janelle sat on the porch, Malik's first printed story in her lap. The man who planted grass but grew a family. Silas stepped out, 2 cups of hot cocoa in hand, steam curling in the cool air. They didn't speak of Beatrice or Percy. Those names no longer weighed on their shoulders. Inside, Malik's voice rang out, reading his story to his little sister, Grace, her giggles a melody of joy. Late that night, when the last light in the community building dimmed, only cricket songs and a faint glow from an upstairs room remained. At an oil-stained plywood table, Malik Carter Whitmore, now 28, sat writing a letter by hand, not to send, but to keep beside the photo of Janelle, smiling in the sunlight. May 12th, my 28th birthday. Mom, today I taught the last period in a teen literature class at the suburban high school on the east side. A brown-skinned student asked, "Mr. Malik, have you ever had people not believe in you just because you're black?" I looked at him and saw myself at 8, when they called you a thief, not for stealing, but for daring to love a white man and raise your son with nothing but blood and tears. They called you a stain on the Whitmore legacy, a threat to their pristine world, but I never saw that. I saw you staying up all night, wiping my forehead through 103 degrees fever in a room with no air conditioning. I saw you split your meals so I could eat, teaching me to spell with a tattered book someone else threw away. Most of all, I saw you, a black woman with no money, no lawyer, no noble blood, walk into that courtroom, face those who trampled you, and declare, "I'm a mother, and I won't run." You grew up in a home with an extra chair at the table for anyone cast out, a home built on love no one could buy or define. Today, standing before my class like you did at Sunrise Ranch, I understand you didn't just save me from a stolen future. You saved my world by teaching me not to hate, but to believe love never bows to prejudice. Mom, black men are taught to be strong, silent, resilient. But today I don't want strength. I want to be weak just once to say, "Thank you, Mom, for not leaving, for not becoming what they try to make you, for choosing to be my mother when no one accepted it. Your son, once left on the roadside, now stands in a classroom, teaching forgotten children they don't need permission to exist. Malik Carter Whitmore, proud to carry your name. He placed the letter in a wooden frame beside Janelle's photo, under an engraved line, "My mother didn't change the world. She changed one child, and that child decided not to stop." Can you feel the love in those words? That afternoon, sunlight spilled like honey over Sunrise Ranch's white fence. Janelle Whitmore sat on the porch, knitting a scarf for little Grace, each stitch weaving memories lost and found. Silas emerged from the kitchen, 2 cups of ginger tea in hand, placing one beside her without a word. He settled into the chair next to her, his gaze drifting to the children playing under the shade tree, their laughter ringing like glass chimes. The ranch hummed with life. Kids chasing each other through the carrot rows, Ruby May teaching them to plant seeds. The classroom alive with the promise of learning. This wasn't just a place. It was a home built not on bloodlines or wealth, but on resilience, love, and the courage to begin again. Can you see the beauty of that new dawn? The late afternoon sun bathed Sunrise Ranch in a warm, golden glow, its rays dancing across the grassy field where Malik Carter Whitmore, now a grown man with a quiet strength in his eyes, sat cross-legged on the soft earth. He read a fairy tale aloud to his little sister, Grace, his voice rising and falling with the magic of the story. "Can you imagine a dragon that breathes flowers instead of fire?" he asked, chuckling as Grace giggled, her small hands snatching the notebook from him to scribble a colorful dragon with chalk. Janelle watched them from the porch, her heart swelling with a peace she once thought was beyond her reach. Oh, how precious that moment felt. No one spoke of the trial, of Beatrice or Percy Langston. Those names, once jagged scars that tore at her soul, were now mere pebbles beneath her feet, too weak to hold back a woman who'd learned to stand tall on her own. Can you feel the weight of her victory? Across the yard, the rhythmic beat of a drum echoed from the classroom. Once a weathered horse barn, now a sanctuary of learning. A flock of children, aged 8 to 13, burst onto the field like birds set free, their hands clutching folded papers, their first life stories, titled The Lines of the Forgotten Ones. Today marked the 10th anniversary of Sunrise Ranch, a milestone that hummed with quiet pride. Janelle refused the stage, turning to Malik with a soft smile. "I don't need to stand up there and talk," she said. "I just want to sit here and hear the kids tell their stories, stories of what they've overcome." Ruby May, now a third-year herbalism student at Texas State, stepped forward first, her voice steady and heartfelt. "I thought I was just a shadow," she read, "until Miss Janelle handed me a book and taught me to say my name without trembling. Can you believe someone saw me when no one else did?" Next came Emmanuel, a brown-skinned boy once expelled for slow learning, his stutter giving way to pride. "I'm not trash," he declared. "I'm a seed, and now I'm growing because of her." No champagne flutes or satin-wrapped flowers adorned the celebration. Just homemade cornbread, freshly squeezed lemonade, and scattered applause, raw and imperfect, like tiny sparks lifting hearts that had once been shattered. Oh, how those simple moments shone. Malik, once the boy lying motionless on a scorching roadside, now stood before a microphone rigged to a wooden pole, his voice clear and strong as he read the final lines of his story. The man only meant to plant grass, but he sowed an entire spring. The mother wasn't anyone special to the world, but she stayed, and that's how we learn the light doesn't fall on the perfect. It finds those who keep going, even after darkness swallows them. Can you hear the truth in his words? As evening settled, the shadows of ancient trees stretched long across the dirt field, blending with the laughter of children chasing each other through rows of freshly planted carrots. In the classroom, little Grace bit her lip, her small hand gripping a pencil as she wrote her first sentence in a white notebook. "My family is the people who didn't leave." Janelle's eyes softened, turning to Silas, the man who'd lost everything yet chose to stay, his presence a quiet anchor. He took her hand, not squeezing, just touching, a promise that he'd never let go again. Oh, what a bond they'd forged. This family wasn't bound by blood or birth certificates, not framed in prestigious genealogies. It was a choice, a fierce, deliberate choice to love when walking away would have been easier, to hold on when the world screamed to let go, to walk together on a road once paved with burning sand and sharp stones. Sunrise Ranch would never grace national headlines. But here, every day, children learned to read, to write, and, most importantly, to stand unashamed of who they were. Janelle Carter, once cast out like a stain on society, now sat on land she'd helped preserve with the kindness of others. No titles, no apologies, just a light that reached those the world had forgotten. True light doesn't seek out lavish places. It finds where it's needed most, where trust has been snuffed out. Janelle's story wasn't just that of a black mother abandoned. It was the journey of anyone overlooked, anyone left on life sidelines for being different. She didn't chase revenge or grovel for society's approval. She chose one thing: to stay, to love, as if the wounds had never cut her. Can you imagine that strength? As the stars began to peek through the deepening sky, the ranch glowed with a quiet magic. The children's voices faded into soft murmurs, their stories tucked into pockets and hearts. Janelle leaned back in her chair, her knitting needles pausing as she watched Grace giggle, now drawing a lopsided heart next to her sentence. Silas sat beside her, his steady presence a reminder of the home they'd built, not from wealth or legacy, but from resilience and love. "Look at them," Janelle whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "They're writing their own stories now. Isn't that what matters?" Silas nodded, his hand brushing hers, a silent vow that this family, this ranch, this light would endure. "And what about you? Have you ever felt forgotten, pushed aside for being different? Or have you been the one to offer a hand, lifting someone else to stand again?" Janelle's journey reminds us that light, when shared, never fades. It grows, it heals, it transforms. Share your thoughts below, because your story might just be the spark someone else needs. If this tale of courage and love moved you, pass it on to those who need to hear it, and don't miss the next chapters of these touching journeys. Because light, like love, only shines brighter when it's given away. Oh, how Janelle Carter's story at Sunrise Ranch stirs the heart. It's a blazing testament to the power of resilience and love in the face of a world that too often judges by skin color or status. I'm moved to tears by her unyielding spirit. A black mother cast out, yet rising to build a sanctuary for forgotten children. This isn't just a lifestyle. It's a revolution of the soul. Janelle's choice to teach kids to stand tall, to write their stories without shame, speaks to a profound truth. True wealth isn't in mansions or titles, but in the courage to love fiercely despite prejudice's sting. Can you feel the fire in that? Socially, the story exposes the ugly underbelly of systemic racism and classism. Beatrice and Percy's schemes, cloaked in privilege, make my blood boil. Their attempt to erase Janelle's worth, to steal her son, mirrors a society quick to marginalize those deemed lesser. Yet, Janelle's triumph, alongside Silas's quiet loyalty, fills me with hope. It's a call to action. We must challenge these injustices, not with anger, but with relentless compassion, like Janelle did. Why should anyone's worth be measured by bloodlines or wealth? Sunrise Ranch embodies a lifestyle of healing and community, a beacon for those society overlooks. I'm inspired to believe we can all build such spaces where love, not hate, defines us. Let's extend our hands, lift others up, and share this light. What's your story of standing tall or helping another rise? Share it, because every voice matters in this fight for a world where no one's left on the roadside.